You're on.
All right, welcome. Welcome to class, lady, gentlemen. So I'm going to start with this quote. This is your kind of do now for today. And I'm going to read you the quote just in case anybody can't see it. I'm convinced that human history, this is going to be a really abstract process for you guys. So it says, I am convinced that human history has not begun, that we find ourselves in the last period of the prehistoric. Does anybody know, can they put that into context? Do you know what it might mean? Do you have any ideas? I mean, this is an opportunity for you to kind of just like dig. You can dig as deep as you want. It's cool. And I'll come back to it later. So this is actually words that Nicholas Sacco said when he came to the United States. So he came from a fairly wealthy family. His father owned a vineyard. Came to the United States at 16 because it was kind of the dream of all Italians. So he gets here and he starts realizing that things are not what he thought they would be. So, are you guys familiar with Sacco, Antonio Sacco? Sacco and Vanzetti, two gentlemen from Italy who came to Boston 1916, 1920. I'll go into the whole program. We're going to start right here. So this is kind of the state of affairs that he understood the United States to be in. So let's kind of start. So Niccolo Sacco and there was Bartolomeo Vanzetti. So he was 16. Bartolomeo Vanzetti was 20 when they came to town, when they came to Boston. So they get off the boat. They worked odd jobs, and this is kind of how they saw things. So there was massive unemployment. The Italians were marginalized, off the board. It was just a dire situation. So another quote that Vanzetti had at one point was, "We don't live in America. We live under America. We're part of a subclass. This dream that everybody had said that we were entitled to was like a non-existent dream." And so it was these thoughts that propelled these two gentlemen to join the Anarchy Party. They felt that it was the party that best represented them in the United States. But unfortunately, at that time in the United States, it's the 1920s. World War I has just ended, and it's the Red Scare. Anybody know what the Red Scare was? Bars.
A period of anti-communism.
Yeah, big time anti-communism. And in Boston, it was almost exacerbated by the fact that a lot of those socialist parties were coming from Italy as well. You had the Italianistas, and they were coming over. So, just to kind of go, is everybody familiar with Sacco and Vanzetti, first off? Those were, okay, well, I'm going to go into just kind of a brief description about what essentially made them famous, and then we'll go into like the greater context of what it kind of meant for society at that point, because it goes much larger than them. So they joined the Anarchist Party. Sacco was a family man. He worked at a factory, had 2 children, solid individual, like was trying to work towards his American dream. Bartolomeo Vanzetti was an amazing poetic individual. What he saw was just this kind of machine, and he opted out of the machine, and he became a fishmonger in his neighborhood. And so already he was kind of marginalized because he wasn't participating in the American dream. He didn't want to become part of that machine. So they joined the Anarchist Party, and there's a slew of crimes going on at that time, and these were not uncommon crimes. They were people would heist payroll trucks. Thanks to that, it was a massive time of crime. So on April 15th, 1920, a paymaster and a guard are shot dead, over $10,000. 3 weeks later, Sacco and Vanzetti are going to they're part of the Anarchist Party, like I already mentioned, and they're going to pick up another car. So the DA sees this as an opportunity to kind of close the case, and here's Italians, here's anarchists. It kind of solves a lot of problems right at once. And so this case confronts, it kind of starts to confront the mythology of American society, essentially, with these guys. It draws a distinction between like 2 different Americas, the what is America, the what is America was supposed to be, and unfortunately what it became in a lot of contexts for these 2 individuals. So, let's see. I'm going to go on. So in the 1920s, massive environment. So the environment that they were arrested in was hostile specifically to Italians. Can anybody see like a reference point? Like, how does that mirror our society today, to where we kind of marginalize immigrant populations or people that are essentially not like ourselves?
A lot of people have problems with Mexican immigrants.
Correct.
How people are marginalized.
Yeah, primarily migrant populations that we kind of. So in their instance, you have migrant populations come in and they fill a specific economic purpose, and yet we still marginalize them. Can you think of anybody that we might do that to in this country today?
Um, I would say Islamic people are usually marginalized.
Correct. And then I'll get to that later. Actually, that's great. The so the DA so the DA comes. The DA has these two gentlemen, and instantly he just separates them. Vanzetti, who has a solid alibi, he was set. It's December 24th when Vanzetti and when this crime happens. And Vanzetti, being a fishmonger, Italians eat eels on the 24th of December on Christmas Eve. He's selling eels. He has 13 people show up in court. His attorney brings 13 people, but they all speak Italian. So basically what the judge says is their word is no good in this court. So he's given 15 years, basically, right from then. For one, he has zero criminal record. Two, that's a big. This is just a robbery. He's given just as for a robbery, he's given 15 years. So the DA sees this as an opportunity to pick them for the other murders as well. And he takes Sacco and Vanzetti and he accuses them. And now this becomes a big problem because now they're up for murder. So they bring in a judge. Let me find his name for you guys. Actually, we'll just go with the DA. The DA, Frederick Katzman. He came in and he was kind of looking to do the Braintree case and then a Vanzetti case. So this all happened right in Boston. So the DA links the two crimes together through false evidence, through one of the actual gentlemen that gave testimony was later charged with perjury in court. So there's tons of holes. So the trial essentially became about patriotism. One of the things that they said to Vanzetti was, "Do you love your country?" And he said, "Well, I don't love the state it's in." And he had actually left to Mexico during the First War. He's like, "So if you loved your country, why did you leave?" So the trial essentially goes on like this. It becomes less about evidence related to the crime. So they're essentially given guilty. They're charged guilty after a trial. The trial's not super important, but there is a lot of fabricated evidence. It's the after the trial that becomes really important. So for 7 years, these two gentlemen are waiting appeal. And the judge comes in one day, throws out all 5 appeals, even a gentleman that had come in and said, "I'm the one that actually committed the crimes." He passed a note to Sacco. He was actually in the jail cell next to him. And he was able to give the police and the DA evidence that they hadn't even released. So he was essentially there. So I want to read you a quote that Fred Moore, who was their initial attorney, came out from California. He wrote, "An Italian in Massachusetts stands as much of a chance of getting a fair trial as a black man accused of rape in the South." So the prosecutors, like I said, they lied about the weapons. So here's where things get really interesting and kind of awesome. So there's this massive uprising. You have kind of almost revolts, riots, protests, Japan, China, South Africa, almost every major city in Europe, most major cities across the United States for these two gentlemen, because now they've essentially been handed down a death sentence, and they're going to die. And everybody understands that all this evidence is essentially fabricated. So now what do? They bring in Harvard, they bring in MIT, and they bring in a retired judge to look over the court case. So the president of Harvard at this time in the 1920s has made his money. His family's money has been made on exploiting Italian immigrants in sweatshops in Lowell and Lawrence and places such as that. So, like I said, he goes through, the process is tainted from the start, obviously. And these two gentlemen, so the gentleman from Harvard, writes his disposition prior to the defense even finishing their case. and the gentlemen are convicted. 1927 sees the city of Boston go into martial law, and so that night, on a hot summer day in August 1927, they execute Sacco and Vanzetti. It's kind of crazy, really crazy. So I was going to bring in this picture of this guy. It was an amazing picture. So it's Ben Shahn. He does amazing work. And it shows those three gentlemen standing over their bodies, just holding lilies. It's a beautiful picture. Hopefully you guys check it out someday. It's amazing. So, anybody here, does this trial speak to anything like we have today? So you have this marginalized community, you have one event, and then you kind of just start throwing your blanket out there and kind of grabbing people in to kind of fix things, or to make amends, or even to like correct the situation on some sort of political level. Any historical precedents behind any of this, even in more contemporary times? Ellsworth, Shauna?
Well, I'm of course thinking of the new Jim Crow book that the undergraduate class is focusing on, which you can do. So, of the war on drugs, doing these massive sweeps, these massive search and seizures, and rounding up large numbers of people who are then fleeing because the criminal justice system isn't working. But a historical example also makes me think of the Japanese during World War II.
Correct. That's one of the ones that I thought of as well. You could also look at after 9/11.
Yeah.
Same situation. Just went threw out blanket policies. See, it's like I said, they went into straight martial law in Boston. When these two gentlemen were convicted, they essentially like shredded the Bill of Rights. During this whole Red Scare, they shredded it, shredded the Constitution. They basically would just go into houses and grab whoever they wanted, and that's just kind of how it ran. So I have another question for you guys, though, too. Do you feel that the justice system in America, the American justice system, who you are and what you believe in, have enormous impacts or determine basically the type of justice that you would receive? And can you think of anything? Shauna gave a great example. Great.
Can you say that again?
Yeah, totally. So can you think of a situation? So do you think that I'm at 10, cool, I'm gonna start winding down. So this is what I'm gonna have, this is what's gonna go on then. So do you think that the American justice system, do you think that who you are and what you believe in has an enormous impact on the type of justice that you receive? And if you could put it into a historical context, I think it'll be a little easier for you to think of some examples.
Well, I guess kind of nowadays a lot of after September 11th into now, the arresting of people without evidence and things through like the Patriot Act or whatever, kind of had affected a certain population more than others. So for Middle Eastern people, they could say that they don't have the same rights because they're the ones who are targeted by it as other people. They might not.
Yeah, it's beautiful elsewhere. So it's beautiful. So what's going to happen now then is we're going to break into groups. I have newspapers from several different places, and I want you guys to kind of like go through these newspapers in your individual groups. I'm going to break you up into groups, and we'll just kind of go through and see if you can find kind of different examples to the same stories. Like how can these gentlemen go through a system that perpetuates one idea yet they received a different treatment? Can you go through and kind of find like historical kind of incidences or even contemporary incidents where people have changed the story essentially due to, I guess, their reasoning, their agenda, like this idea of a historical agenda.